Thanks very much, Allison, and welcome everyone. Seeing some familiar faces here, or familiar names, and so that's great. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this project today, and so I'm going to bring my screen up. So I hope if that's not working for anyone, I hope somebody will let me know. Yeah, so it's 10 years. It's hard to imagine it's been 10 years. But here we are, 10 years of stewardship research and education at Otter Ponds Demonstration Forest.
We can't see your screen yet, Matt.
Okay.
So if you go share screen, should work.
There we go. That's why I got to press that button.
Yeah.
There.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. We're in. This is only the second time I've presented on Zoom. So, yeah, here we go. So, so as mentioned, my main connection, or the point of my life when I was the most involved with Otter Ponds, was when I was the forestry program coordinator at the Ecology Action Center. I did 2 stints at EAC, a short contract in 2010. And then from 2011 into 2015, I was the forestry program coordinator. And in both instances, my first day on the job coincided with milestones for OPDF. So my first contract in 2010, the very first day was the day they signed the operating agreement. I remember going down to the legislature. It was my first trip to Province House. And that was a heck of a first day on the job. And then the idea coming on full time, long term with EAC, really the opportunity to be involved with Otter Ponds was, I think, what pushed me over the edge to take that opportunity. And I spent my first week or so during that time as helping to cut out the road right away at Otter Ponds in the first section of road building. I think I may have been the only environmentalist in the history of the environmental movement to be paid to cut down trees. But I think my hope is that by the end of the presentation today, you'll just see why the EAC and myself thought that was a great time, great way to spend my time back then. So you can be forgiven if you've never been to or heard of Mooseland. It's a small community on the eastern shore, just a little bit inland from Tangier, along the Tangier River. Very much a forest-dependent community. At one point, there was a sawmill in the community, the Press family sawmill. Lots of folks who live there work in the industry, and yeah, so that's the location of the project area. This is the land base itself. The road there is the Mooseland Road that comes up from Tangier, and the orange boundary is the project area itself. That's the Tangier River that flows through the middle of it. It's a nice chunk of ground, about 500 hectares, 1,200 acres. And most of the road building activity that you see in the center of that project is all work that's been done since the project started. And yeah, the next series of photos I have were all from the original foray into the project lands in 2009. There was a tour that was held to sort of scope out this project that was, I think, the brainchild of Wade Prest. One of the things that struck me about my time about any of the time I've spent at Otter Ponds was just how much knowledge of the history of this land base that the community has. Mooseland's a small, tight-knit community, and all the community members that I've ever met have a very high level of knowledge around the history, the kind of the personal history, the way that the community has interacted with the land. They all understood what a special place it was from a point of view of the forest ecology there. Yeah, I was just very impressed with that. That was one of the things that struck me. So the project itself is really just a great example of climax Acadian forest. The core forest area in the center hasn't had any major activity since the 1940s or 50s. So excellent examples of red spruce, like you can see here. Tolerant hardwood ridges along the drumlins. It's part of the Tangier, just along the edge of the Tangier drumlins. area. The forest has been it's been left alone long enough that you're really starting to see the natural processes that happen in the forest occur. Things like deadwood cycling, stands where fir has fallen out. I mean, oftentimes in softwood stands, we don't always leave them alone long enough for them to start going through some of their natural dynamics. And that's very prevalent at Otter Ponds. And I think this picture really shows that. There's Wade Prest himself. I often say that Wade's the one who got us into this, but what he's pointing at there is about 125-year-old or 100 or so year old red spruce tree that's grown out up out of a log, a nurse log. And so you kind of let that sink in your head for a minute, and you realize that that's a 100-year-old tree that grew out of a tree that blew down sometime maybe 100 years before that, and provided the nursing spot for that seedling to take place. So just a very special piece of property. Some of the hardwood drumlins in one part on Powderhorn Hill, there's a couple of very large diameter beech trees, and I've been in there when the bears, in years where the bears have been using that, and you see the nests where they're breaking the branches off and sitting up in there and helping themselves to the beech nuts. And you can see the claw marks from them climbing up the hill. Just some incredible hardwood up on the drumlins, as you can see. And one really unique thing about the area of Mooseland, there was a birch dieback in the area in the 40s or 50s, and the yellow birch was hit very hard. And so in a lot of drumlins, what you'll see is hardwood communities with a lot of sugar maple, red maple, beech, and not very much yellow birch. And so you'll have a few remnant yellow birch, very large kind of relic trees. They're the only ones that really survive the dieback. The birch was so heavily impacted that they didn't even produce seeds until sometime in the 80s. And so often where birch is present on the hills, you'll have a few of these kind of relic big trees, and then a cohort of pole-size stems that were kind of recruited in that once the tree started to lay down seedlings again, or seed again, in the 80s, and sort of nothing in between. And one exception to that is German Lake Hill, which is the first drumlin that you come into along as you enter the project lands. And so you can see here a pretty thrifty looking stand of yellow birch regen, and as well quite a bit of remnant yellow birch that wasn't impacted as heavily as the dieback. So a very unique place. And as I said, the community was very very aware of that. There was a lot of community use in there in terms of hunting and fishing and some paddling on the river. And so the people of the community really knew that this piece of crown land right in their back door was a gem, and they all, many people used it and loved it. And so you could understand when why they would be concerned when in 2009, the western side of the project lands, the area accessible from the Mooseland Road, was clear-cut harvested. And certainly the forest out here isn't as unique and intact and mature as the stuff in the core area. But I think what really kicked this project off was a concern that the same approach to forest management was going to be applied within that core area where that mature climax forest exists. And we've certainly made lots of strides in the last 10 years in the way that we manage crown land. But I think it would be fair to say in 2009, it was more of an all or nothing proposition. Either we would protect forest land in our protected areas network, and we would have no activity in there whatsoever, or we were harvesting very heavily with heavy removals like the one that you see here. And it was sort of that all or nothing approach. And neither one of those outcomes would jive with the community values that were placed on that land. As I said, Mooseland is a forest dependent community. The residents there weren't acting in a preservationist way to push for this. They didn't necessarily want to see the property completely protected, but they recognized that it was uniquely positioned to demonstrate an approach to forestry that was more in line with the ecological and social values that were present there. And so what the impetus for the project became using this as a demonstration site to show that there is a different way forward for forest management, one that allows a balance between that all or nothing sort of proposition that I recognized before. And so this was the boundary of that harvest in 2009. And it's that core area, right? So it's the core area that I think that folks were most concerned about and didn't want to see that same approach applied there. And so the push really came from the community. Wade Prest put out a call to some folks to say, hey, I have this idea, let's go for a tour. All those pictures that we just took, I just showed you, were from that day. And so that was sort of, I guess, the origin story for how Otter Ponds came together as a project, the original idea that pushed it. So I'll stop shy of calling it a community forest. I don't think the project would itself pass the test of a community forest, but it is a community-run forestry entity, and I believe it is the first ever time that citizen groups were given a chance to be in control of forestry activities on Crown land. So very, very unique in that sense. The project is operated by a division of the Nova Scotia Woodlot Owners and Operators Association, and it's a unique partnership between four NGOs. So the Woodlot Owners and Operators Association, Ecology Action Centre, Eastern Shore Forest Watch, and the Mooseland and Area Community Association. There's a 14-member board of directors that oversee the project. Each of the four NGOs provide 3 members to sit on the board, and then there's a non-voting member from Department of Lands and Forests, as well as one traditionally from the pulp mill in Pictou County. But again, because the government and industry reps on the board didn't necessarily have voting rights, the decision-making power for moving the project for us forward was vested within those the community groups and the board of director representatives that they have. And we're in year 10 now. We finished up 10 years of a 25-year agreement to manage the project lands. So the objectives or the goals of the project, I guess, summarized, are to operate as a working woodlot, producing timber, forest values, and ecosystem services. So an emphasis on a working woodlot there. Trying to demonstrate the philosophy, science, and practice of uneven forest management. Develop techniques for forest restoration. Much of the core area of the project hasn't had any activity since the middle of the 1900s, but there were some 20 and 30-year-old harvests, as well as the cutting that was done in 2009. So that provides an opportunity to develop some techniques for forest restoration. And then act as an outdoor classroom to demonstrate that timber production is compatible with protection of other forest values and the provision of ecosystem services. And that one really, I think, summarizes it for me. The goal was to try to show you could have your cake and eat it too, with respect to forest management and balancing the economic, ecological, and social values that the community and society places on our forests. So I'm going to just walk you through, I guess, a 10-year review of what we've been up to, organized around some of the major themes that the talented Christy Verstraeten has put into the report that she wrote. And I should note, I'm very thankful to have Christy on the call with us. She's been given authority to interrupt me if I say anything too blatantly wrong. I've been involved with the Nova Scotia Woodlot Owners and Operators Association long enough to remember the days before we had paid staff. And Christy's part of a very talented team that help run the association, and she works a day a week on Otter Ponds projects. And she'll be around to help answer any questions as well. So, so given that it was fairly undeveloped when the project launched in 2010, a lot of the initial focus was on developing infrastructure. So in various sort of leaps and starts, we were able to complete 3.25 kilometers of really good year-round Class D forest roads to provide access into the project lands for everything that we want to do in there. Built 3 bridges. One was a 5-meter span bridge. That's the one pictured there with the picker truck. And then 2 3-meter span timber bridges that actually the second 2 bridges, the second and third bridges, were prototypes of kind of a unique design that I'll speak of later. And that ability to try new things, not just as an entity, but also an opportunity for the government to prototype new opportunities or new ways of doing things. I think that for me stands out as one of the major highlights or successes that we've seen in the last 2 years. I'll talk a bit more about that when we're on the bridges. And again, I guess on that theme, a prototype backcountry human ore outhouse. I recall being pretty amazed how long it took to navigate the permitting process for this. But what it was an opportunity to try to solve the problem of how do you have backcountry outhouses in places like Cape Split or even Kedgie Park and things like that. So we're able to establish a visitor shelter, picnic area, amphitheater, fire pit, arboretum, as well as 5.5 kilometer hiking trail. And all along the way, and you're going to see this in the photos I'm going to share you next, all along the way, both to keep costs down and as well just to involve the community and volunteers. All of this was done utilizing volunteer labor. So people were out helping with building the bridges. So a tremendous amount of volunteer effort has gone into to achieving all the infrastructure projects that I described. So just a couple of photos from this going clockwise from the top left. That's Marshall Bateman. He has built the lion's share of the roads that are on the other side of the first bridge. Excellent operator on his excavator there. You can see his machine working away at the right there. Bottom left would be the results is finished road. And there was also a gate established. The gate was put there not necessarily to control access or keep people out, but just as a way to protect property when there are harvesting activities going on, and try to limit the vehicle access a little bit in cases like that. But lots of road building. The ground's really good for building roads down there, as you can see. And so these are some photos from the first bridge that was built. So you can see there's Dale Preston, Mike Murray working away on the moving some timbers into place. This bridge went over Otter Ponds Brook, just a traditional timber crib bridge. And you can see the finished product there. The deck planks that you see us walking over in the bottom right-hand corner, those were actually sawn from a red spruce tree that was cut just a little further along the road right away. So the majority, I think almost all of the lumber that was used in the building projects outside of the treated lumber that went into building the bridges, but the lumber for the visitor shelter and the outhouse, any of the smaller bridges, there's a memorial bench built in honor of Sidney Press when he passed away in 2015. All of that material was sawn on site and from harvested wood that came off the project lands. So this is some pictures showing the second and third bridges that were built. And this was, again, I talked about that prototype design. And so the challenge with the site was that the stream was intermittent. So there was a bit of a main channel, sort of a wetland area. It really only had water in it during the spring runoff and then after a heavy rain. And so the goal was to try to help to keep the cost down, and then also minimize the impact on the wetland itself. By trying to by doing a bit of a balancing act between keeping the opening size of the bridge small to help keep the cost down, but then not necessarily just channeling all the water in the site just through that opening under the bridge. And so what they did was to on either side of the bridge, and you can see them doing it in the top two photos. They laid down some timber crib and between 4 and 6 pipes that were going to kind of act as the overflow. So the majority of the water would be expected to flow under the sort of main channel where the bridge was, but during the really heavy rains and the runoff, those pipes on either side of the bridge provided a little bit of extra capacity to move water through. And again, so this was the first, it may not be the first time it was done. It was the first time it was done with the blessing of the Department of Environment. And so kind of a unique approach. And again, I think that the project and the way it's been set up, it's a perfect opportunity for agencies like Department of Environment to work with a group to try new things like this. And turned out really well. The pipes work really great. And it significantly reduced the size of the span that was needed in order to accommodate the size of the drainage area upstream from where the bridge was. So this is the visitor shelter, kind of a heartbreaking story, that darn Hurricane Dorian. So you can see lots of volunteer folks helping out. The footings being poured in the top left corner there. Building a timber frame. Kate Campbell was the president of the project, of the board, for a long time. She's a local resident and carpenter. She designed and basically led the building of this visitor shelter. You can see in the bottom left, just a great little spot, enough room for 40 people to cram in there if it was ever raining pretty hard. And then sadly, in the bottom right, you can see the results of the damage from Hurricane Dorian. And so we're able to salvage a little bit of materials out of the shelter. The footings are still in good shape. That tree that's fallen across, I believe that's since been milled up and is going to be part of the visitor shelter that will rise again. And I think during the Hurricane Dorian cleanup, there was a bit of an effort made to create a little bit of space around that landing so we don't have to worry about blowdown again. But that's certainly a reality with partial harvesting in general and working on the Eastern Shore in particular. So this is the human ore toilet. Such a beautiful picture of an outhouse. And so in a place like Cape Split, the Department of Lands and Forestry would have to install a human ore toilet, and it costs as much as $10,000 to put in a kind of prefabricated outhouse, basically. And so what this was an opportunity was to try a different design that would limit the cost. So you notice it's got 2 doors, and the idea is that you would use one chamber and there's do your business, sprinkle some sawdust. Over the years, as things build up, you would close down one side, switch over and use the other, and allow the first side that you were working on to compost and go back into the ground, and then just kind of switching yourself from side to side. But a pretty handy little design. And again, it was a partnership with an engineer with the Department of Lands and Forestry, and going through the permitting process, and which was very lengthy and complicated, but eventually managed to try something new and hopefully enable managers who are looking after places where backcountry facilities are required to be able to cut some costs in the future. So as part of the trails, and I'll speak about funding at the end, but Mountain Equipment Co-op provided OPDF with some funding to establish a master plan for trails. Bit of a messy map. The black lines would be the road network. The white lines represent portage routes for canoers. And then the different colored lines on the map represent different trails that have been planned. Not all of them have been built. And again, I think Hurricane Dorian did a number on the trail network as well. So still remains a bit of work to do to open up the trails that have been built. And pardon me, it's resulted in a bit of a pause on trail building activities now, but lots of access. It's really important for any of the educational opportunities or workshops or field days for folks to be able to get around. So this has been a big boost in terms of being able to share what's going on at Otter Ponds with the audiences that are coming there to see it. So on the forest management side, the property itself is managed in partnership with Picea Forestry Consulting. Patricia Merrow and Sandy Hyde have an agreement in place to handle things like the block planning, the layout, pre and post treatment assessments, things like that. And they're top notch when it comes to the approach in forestry that this project is trying to promote. A lot of the initial harvesting has been focused on the roads, right? So opening up the road right away, using the revenue from the timber harvesting to fund the building of the road down the way after the harvest has been opened up. There have been a number of silviculture treatments. The Northern Hardwood Research Institute, Tolerant Hardwood Management, has set up some sites to demonstrate a couple of different hardwood management techniques. In 2019, there was 46 hectares of PCT completed in the site that was harvested in 2009. And then a big operation, as I mentioned before, lots of blowdown from Hurricane Dorian. Some of it would have been in areas that were treated adjacent to road right-of-way sections, but lots of just natural stands of parts of the stand that hadn't been touched at all where there was blowdown as well. So an effort was made last year to get in and clean a lot of that stuff up. So just some photos. The top left photo is Wade. That was the original, the first harvest that was ever done. Wade's company, Forestex, was the one that was hired to do that. Top right is a local sawmill operator who came in to help saw. That was those were pine trees that were harvested out of the road right away that there wasn't a market for, and so those timbers were sawn up and used to build the ill-fated visitor shelter there. And you can see that's the Conform was hired in 2020 to do the hurricane salvage and to open up some more road right-of-ways for us. You can see they got their machine going there. It's been a mix of manual harvesting but I would say most of the work that's been done there has been done using a machine. So a research imperative, I guess, or initiative has been a big part of the work that's been done there. So lots of different research and activities that went on. In the summer, in June of 2015, we hosted a bio blitz. It was a really popular event. Lots of folks came out. We fanned out in teams and just went to record as many species as we possibly could. The idea being trying to get some baseline information on what's there and provide us the information that we need to be able to monitor trends in terms of what happens to the relative abundance and presence of species as we manage the project over time. So good opportunity for some baseline data. The picture here, and we'll talk about it again, but there was an owl nesting research project. A researcher from St. FX is using Otter Ponds to study the nesting and migration patterns of the boreal and northern boreal and saw-whet owls. And so there been for 4 years now, I guess, there have been nesting boxes on site. For the first 3 years, they provided excellent habitat for the local squirrel population. But actually this year, they not that long ago, they found a saw-whet owl using one of the nest boxes. So I think quite a bit of work went into trying to find just the right type of habitat for them. And it was a success. In 2016, we had a spring bird count. I was on the bird count with 4 bird experts. I can tell you I was pretty out of my element. I did manage to spot to pick up the crow that flew over our heads at one point, but I just was so impressed by the skill of the folks who do the breeding bird surveys, and that was a memorable morning for sure. We actually found a couple of threatened. We found Canada warbler, and I believe olive-sided flycatcher were both documented on the sites. Set up a half a dozen plot locations that would be able to go back and do further monitoring on in the future. I mentioned before the Tolerant Hardwood Management Group from the Northern Hardwood Research Institute has been up to set up some trials for as part of their silviculture prescription guide. That work hasn't been done yet, but it is certainly in the works for the future. And there was a liming trial, part of an effort to reverse the damage that's been happening to our soils as a result of acid rain. So some aerial liming was done, and plots were set up to manage or to monitor the impacts. It was an extension of some of the work that's been going on in the West River watershed down in Sheet Harbor with their in-stream limers, and expanding that into doing stream side liming and eventually potentially catchment liming, where using the aerial application with the helicopter. So the top left, there's our resident owl. I think based on the first 3 years of the owl nest program, I would say he's got lots of squirrels to chase after now. So that must have been pretty exciting to be able to find that. In the top right-hand corner, while the silviculture trials in the hardwood haven't moved forward, there was a hardwood management field day that was hosted at Otter Ponds. What you have there is staff from Group Savoy talking about hardwood grading with the participants. So I think 8 or 10 logs were harvested, and they led a great discussion on maximizing the value of your hardwood logs. And the bottom 2 shots show the helicopter applying the lime in the riparian zones along the Otter Ponds Brook and Tangier River. So an education mandate as well, trying to bring people to the site, groups and individuals through various days, field days and events. So over the last 10 years, there have been 20 tours with school groups ranging from elementary to grad students. There was even an international team of researchers that were coming together to study how communities respond to conservation challenges. Youth groups, community organizations, many others. As well. Oh, I'm gonna go back there. 7 public events were held. The field days, the nature day that I mentioned, the bird count. There was a mushroom foray. The Mushroom Society came and had a great day in there. Lots of mushrooms around to see. Guided hikes. In total, just shy of 700 people have visited the project for various public events and tours over the last 10 years. Lots of workshops as well, ranging from erosion control with native plants, old growth forest assessment, roads, trails, bridges. Lots of opportunities for workshops with folks, and as well 2 directional felling chainsaw courses. And I think around 200 participants in total took part in a wide range of these different educational workshops and events. Always a fun time. I love doing the tours. My favorite was with the school kids. I remember sitting on the landing, waiting for the bus to arrive, and always being very encouraged when a good proportion of the young students, grade school, middle school, came off the bus wearing camo. When you had a lot of students wearing camo, you knew you were in for a good day, and the kids just really loved it. I have this memory of us doing stream sampling. So we gave the kids a little net and a bucket and set them loose on Otter Pond stream to see what they could find. And just having this image of elementary kids just up to their waist in water, not even caring that they were getting wet, and really getting hands-on and enjoying themselves. And so the public events are great. I think it's been very successful. So you can see I think that's Kevin Keys talking about forest soils. The picture in the top right shows the amphitheater and fire pit arboretum sort of gathering place that was built. That was before Hurricane Dorian, obviously. And then a couple of pictures on the bottom from the chainsaw directional felling course on the left. And then that's the mushroom foray that you're seeing in the bottom right corner there. So there've been there've been some publications. There's more stuff I feel like that's been gone on there than I had space to talk about. But the popularity of the boundary line workshops led to staff producing a boundary line maintenance guide that is available on the Otter Ponds website. Created a deadwood policy to help set some goals and set some guidance for folks around how to manage for deadwood on your woodlots. One of the things I often hear from landowners, they'll often say that, I don't cut a tree down until it's dying or dead or dying already. And to me, I always felt like once a tree is dead, it's too valuable to cut down. And so as a result of the harvesting history there, the deadwood levels were a little bit lower perhaps than they should have been. And so there was a policy direction and a real effort made to help reverse that. And then the bridge construction videos on the second and third bridges, the prototype design, there were some videos that were produced from that. And I've asked Christy to share those links with you folks in the chat there, so you have a chance to check that out. And then a number of funding partners, I think, have been very important in terms of moving this forward. Department of Lands and Forestry, through their road building program, help provide funding to pay for the cost of roads. Roads are the biggest cost for landowners, certainly in managing their land, and so that was really helpful in terms of kicking off the road building project. The Ecology Action Center provided a staff person to help develop the educational materials, to establish partnerships with local schools, to develop materials that would allow teachers to feel good about bringing their students here, help them make links to how Otter Ponds can help them meet curriculum outcomes, as well as look at other funding opportunities. So for a time we did, there was a staff person from EAC that was dedicated to that side of the project development. Mountain Equipment Co-op was provided some funding for the development of a master plan for the trails. And so that's the document you see in the picture. And then through an HRM community grant, some funding from a local business, as well as the local health authority, has all been put into helping to build the trails, giving us equipment and materials to be able to make the trail building happening. Huge amount again on the trails, just a huge amount of volunteer effort that went into establishing over 5 kilometers of hiking trails on the project now. Yeah, so that's I guess a quick review of what's gone on at Otter Ponds in the last 10 years. I'm really thankful to have Christy here to help navigate any of the questions that you folks might have. Yeah, I'm sure there's lots I left out as well, but been quite a bit going on in the last 10 years.
Can you see the chat, Matt?
In a second, I think I will. Let me get in here. Somebody asking me. Sorry?
Yeah, I have a question. There's a question in the chat. I can read it to you.
Okay,
like.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, it says, I don't think I heard you use the term ecological forestry once, but it looks like this may be what OP is about. Does this demonstration forest provide direction to this paradigm change for Nova Scotia?
I would certainly think so. I think that the term ecological forestry, and certainly having ecological forestry as a policy direction, is relatively new, whereas I think that was definitely the direction that Otter Ponds was heading. So I think Otter Ponds was heading in that direction before that's where we necessarily would have known that it was called. But the management plan, the goal of the project is to certainly to manage in line with the principles of ecological forestry. One, I think, perfect example of that is that when in going through the management planning process and establishing an allowable cut for the project, there was a precautionary principle put in place of leaving 30%. So whatever the AAC was, we dropped it down 30% to leave behind some growth that would serve those ecological roles. And I think certainly the management of Otter Ponds is exactly in line and provides a blueprint for that, for sure. There. Get out of there.
If anyone else has a question, feel free to leave it in the chat or raise your hand and unmute.
I have a question, Matt. Given all the things that you just presented on, which is awesome, I knew a little bit about Otter Ponds, but obviously not as much as I needed to, because that was really interesting. I was kind of intrigued, and I don't know why we haven't talked about this before, why you kind of don't think it quite qualifies as a community forest, because it seems to have all the ingredients of a community forest. And I've always felt a little bit guilty when we were kind of forming the Medway Community Forest to say this is the first in Nova Scotia, because I was always kind of at the back of my mind, I was always thinking, well, there's Otter Ponds, and that's kind of a community forest as well.
Yeah, it's a great question, Jane. I would call it a community-run demonstration forest. I don't know, that's maybe splitting hairs, but so I think a broad definition of a community forest would be a piece of forest managed by the community with direct benefit to the community. And I think it's on that third point that we would fall shy, because there's no mechanism for direct benefit to flow back to the community. Any of the revenue, for example, from timber harvesting, that just goes back into the project. And so, yeah, so I mean, it's a bit of an academic question maybe, but I think it falls shy just based on the fact that there's not that direct benefit. Yeah, but it's still, like I said, it is really, I just saw Tom's comment. I think it's a community-run demonstration forest, and certainly the first time that community groups have been given a chance to really to take the ball on Crown land in Nova Scotia.
And I guess there's maybe no financial gain, but there's obviously recreational gain, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's lots of benefit, but not maybe direct. It's more indirect, or yeah. Christy, would you add anything to that? And Christy, did you have anything to add on the first question as well? I don't want to.
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, I had the same question myself. I really don't know whether it can be classified as a community forest or not. I guess it depends on the definition you use. Yeah.
Maybe Tom can answer that question. Tom Beckley.
I think it was Tom who told me that it fell short. So. And I could say, Tom, I see your question in there as well. I'm kind of chuckling at that. So I think two people are responsible. Other than Wade, we had two champions within the NDP government in 2009 and 10. Sid Prest, who unfortunately passed away in 2015. He was the MLA for the Mooseland area. And also John McDonnell was the minister at the time. And I think those two gentlemen are largely responsible for paving the way for Otter Ponds to move forward. And I think the bigger question is, how the heck did Medway only get what they got?
And another thing about the 25 years is I think after 10 years, we can renegotiate for another 5. And then after that, every 5 years, we can renegotiate for another 5. So at the moment, we're at 10 years and we're renegotiating right now for the extra 5, which would take us to a 30-year contract. And then 5 years from now, we have to renegotiate again to get another 5 years on the end.
And I'm going to ask another question. Would you see, was it really good when you had a staff member dedicated to that, or at least that had time for that? Is that something that could happen again, so that you could kind of do more with the land base, because it just has so much potential?
Well, I'd like Christy to jump in here as well, but the staff member I referenced was a short defined contract from EAC that was about trying to help kick off the educational component. And that was, so Claire Robinson was hired as part of that to come in, and I think it was a day a week or something short term to really kick that off. I would say from my perspective, the biggest boost came when we got Christy for a day a week as part of her job with NSWOA, and having her dedicated to be working at that. So yeah, Christy, I'd love to hear about what's that been like for you, and yeah, what sort of things you're up to.
Yeah, I've loved every minute of it. It's one of the best parts of my job. And I think I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now. So I wasn't around at the beginning of Otter Ponds, but I've been around for the second half so far. And yeah, I think it's useful having someone kind of keep the knowledge, because our board members cycle through and the newer ones don't necessarily know what went on before, and our older ones cycle off and maybe come back again later. But it's useful to have someone who kind of knows everything that's been going on in case there are any questions or we need to find something. But yeah, no, I think we could always use more time, more staff time, but hard to justify it with the money that we have coming in from harvest. We don't really have a lot, because we waited a long time to harvest to make the economics make sense, because we had a harvest plan for years, but the wood markets, the way they were, it never worked out that we would actually make any money. We would break even for so long. So that's why we had so many years without harvest. But that makes it hard to get funding to do other things using the harvest. So any extra stuff that we've got, we've sought out grants and funding for that. And it's hard to get grants to cover staff time, as Jane knows. So yeah, the short answer is we could use a lot more staff time, but the one day a week keeps us afloat.
And I would echo that sentiment about it being the best part of work. When that was my decision to come on board at EAC, was largely because of the clause of my contract that said I could basically do whatever needed to be done at Otter Ponds. So everything from helping cut the road right away to holding the watercourse permit on the bridge builds to leading tours, it was definitely same best part of my time at EAC for sure. And I should mention, we have on the call Ryan McIntyre, who was a part of the project as well. He was for a time a representative from Northern Pulp. So shout out to Ryan.
I did very little on that project, but I do remember I remember going out with Wade. The permit was, I can't remember the individual from NSC, but I remember Wade and I went out and looked at the potential road location and crossing. I was doing a lot of road layout at the time. I was working for myself at the time, actually, and doing some contract work for Northern, and went down and met with Wade, and we talked about that crossing with the cribbing and that unique style with the logs across the wetland and the culverts. And I remember being really intrigued by that, and just Wade was really excited about it. And I got to attend some board meetings over the years. And anyway, I've always thought really highly of the Otter Ponds. That's why I wanted to join today. I just show my support, and I'm no longer working in central Nova Scotia, but I did spend a lot of time in Mooseland and Halifax County, and I think very highly of the project. So great job, Matt, and all involved.
Cheers.
Tom, did you have another question there?
I've got so many questions. No, I'm just curious. I mean, given the commitment of the government to ecological forestry, and if Otter Ponds is a good example, like, should there not be one or two of these in every county or region of municipality, to sort of do that outreach, especially to show private landowners, how it might be done. And further to that, like, it seems like there's been some constraint, or as Matt suggests, the fact that there's not actually a revenue stream, like going to the community, like maybe the next demonstration project or the one after that, like, gets to that level where I suppose you could really call it a community forest, where there's, job benefits and financial benefits flowing back into the community from stewarding the forest this way. So I guess it's maybe a statement or observation more than a question, but should there not be a social movement to make this happen all over Nova Scotia?
I certainly hope so. I think, to your point, Tom, that part of the Leahy report and the implementation of ecological forestry and the way it's going to work in a province that is 70% private ownership was that the province would demonstrate so that landowners could follow. And so, yeah, absolutely. I would personally love to see more of this. And, for me, I just think that the way to accomplish that is through community-based tenure agreements, right? For me, like if you can get the governance piece right and make sure you get the right people at the table representing the broad base of interests, and set them loose on our crown lands, then yeah, I absolutely think that's the best way forward. And I would love to see, and as well, I would love to see us go that next step of community forests, not just community-run demonstration forests. Absolutely. It's a social movement I would jump on board with.
Maybe set them loose isn't the best way to term it, Matt. Set them loose on crown land.
Yeah. Well, but I do think that so what we're trying to do now is use regulations and use legislation, regulations, and policy to constrain corporate entities. And it's expensive, it's slow, it's inefficient, and I don't think you need any of that stuff if you've got the right people around the table who can all agree that this is the way that we're going to go. The two places where ecological forestry is best developed right now today are Otter Ponds and Medway Community Forest. And, in the case of Medway, Medway, I think, is their opportunity to advance ecological forestry since they've opened. They've been constrained by DLF. It would be my observation as a member and a keen observer there. So, I think that if you can get that governance piece right, you just have to get out of the way and let things happen. And if all those people around the table that represent all those interests are okay with it, then you have to expect that the outcome would be along the lines of what we're talking about with ecological forestry.
Yeah, I think having setting up a dozen more Otter Ponds or something similar to that, or something between Medway and Otter Ponds, and kind of having parameters, but not a cookie cutter structure, that's the same every time. Like, I guess allowing some degree of social experimentation around how that governance is done, I think could create some really great learnings. Like, governments tend to be risk averse. I mean, I think that's why Medway has such a short leash. So congratulations for getting your 25-year tenure. But, I think in order to get it right, I think some experimentation and therefore some opportunities for some of these experiments to fail or not be as successful, I think could be quite beneficial. But it's really a tough sell to governments who have to always appear to be knowing what they're doing at all times, not be questioned by citizens like, you're doing this wrong.
Yep. I know there's a license in the central region that seems to be up for grabs, so that might be one place to start. Anybody else? Any questions? No?
Well, if there's any more questions later, I'm sure Matt might be willing to share his email. I just wanted to thank Matt again for presenting tonight. And next week in our summer seminar series, we'll be hosting a few presenters from the Coastal Actions NOVA Action Youth Cohort, and covering topics ranging from the bioaccumulation of microplastics in mussels to the effects of copper sulfate on germination rates in lupins. We hope everyone is well, and we get to see you all again very soon. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Matt.
Matt.
That was great.
Well done,
Good to
Matt.
see you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks,
Good
folks.
to see you.